Have you ever watched someone walk through what looks like hell and somehow come out stronger? Maybe they lost everything, their job, their home, their health, even someone they loved. Yet instead of collapsing, they rise. They keep going. Something deep inside them says, "Don't give up." Have you ever wondered what that something is? It's not luck. It's not just mental toughness. It's not even faith in the traditional sense. Most of the time, what keeps people going when everything else falls apart is purpose, a why, a reason to keep breathing, moving, fighting, living. There's a quote that cuts straight to the heart of this idea, and it might be one of the most powerful sentences ever spoken. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. These are the words of Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher known for shaking the foundations of how we think about life, suffering, and meaning. But what does this quote really mean? And why does it matter so much today, maybe more than ever? In this video, we're going to explore the deeper meaning behind that quote. Not just as a piece of abstract philosophy, but as something you can use. Something you can carry with you when life gets confusing, hard, or even unbearable. By the time you finish watching this, you'll not only understand what Nietzsche meant, you'll also be equipped to find your own why, your own reason to live, and your own way to face any challenge with strength. Let's begin at the very center of the quote, "He who has a why." This part isn't just poetic, it's psychological. Nietzsche is saying that if a person has a clear, meaningful reason to live, if they have a purpose, they can get through things that seem impossible. Pain becomes bearable. Confusion becomes tolerable. Even the fear of the unknown starts to shrink, not because the situation gets easier, but because you become stronger. Let's flip the question to you. Think for a second. What is your why? What is that one thing, or maybe a few things, that make your life worth the fight? Is it your children? A dream you haven't given up on? A calling you feel in your bones? A promise you made to someone who believed in you? Now imagine someone who doesn't have a why. They wake up, go to work, scroll through their phone, go to bed, and repeat. They're not living, they're surviving. And the second something truly difficult happens, like heartbreak or illness or failure, they crumble. Not because they're weak, but because they're unanchored. Their ship has no sail, no compass. They're at the mercy of the storm. But you're here because you want something more. You want to find your anchor. You want to discover or rediscover your why. Nietzsche knew suffering. He lived with chronic illness, lost friendships, constant rejection, and mental decline. Yet through it all, he produced ideas that changed the way we think. Why? Because he had a purpose. He believed his suffering had meaning. And that belief gave him the strength to keep going. He wasn't alone. History is filled with people who survived the unthinkable, not because of brute force, but because of a vision. They believed their lives still had value, even if their circumstances were unbearable. And that belief, it became their superpower. So, before we go deeper into the philosophies and stories that support this truth, take a moment, breathe, ask yourself honestly, what's your why? You don't have to have a perfect answer yet, but know this, when you find it, when you feel it in your bones, it will change the way you face every hardship, every setback, every unknown. This is just the beginning. Stay with me. Let's go deeper. Let's slow it down and sit with this quote. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. It's short, It's elegant, and it's packed with a truth that can literally change your life. But to unlock its full power, we need to go beyond the surface. Let's take it one piece at a time and break it open. He who has a why to live. What is Nietzsche really saying here? He's not just talking about survival. He's talking about something deeper, your purpose. The thing that keeps your feet moving forward even when your heart is tired. The fire in your chest that refuses to go out no matter how hard the wind blows. Your why is your reason to keep going. It's what gives your suffering context. It's what gives your joy direction. Without it, you drift. With it, you move forward. Now let's look at the second part. Can bear almost any how. Life is full of how. How do I survive this illness? How do I recover from failure? How do I rebuild after heartbreak? How do I move forward when I feel completely lost? Nietzsche is saying that if your reason is strong enough, if your why is powerful enough, then the how becomes bearable. It may still be painful. It may still be messy. But you can get through it. This isn't wishful thinking. It's a mental framework. It's a way of seeing life that turns struggle into fuel. It takes you from victim to warrior. Let's use a metaphor. Imagine two hikers climbing the same brutal mountain. The weather is horrible. The path is steep. Rocks cut into their shoes. One of them is doing it just because they were told to. The other is climbing because their child is waiting at the top. Which one do you think will keep going? That's the difference why makes. Purpose gives pain meaning. And when pain has meaning, it stops being just pain. It becomes a test, a challenge, a mission. Even Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Auschwitz, said, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning." Frankl took Nietzsche's words and lived them. He watched people who had lost everything, their homes, their dignity, their freedom, hold on because they still had a reason to. And those who couldn't find a why, they gave up. They faded. So let me ask you something. When life hits you hard, when the how of your situation feels unbearable, do you retreat or do you return to your why? You see, Nietzsche wasn't trying to give us a warm blanket. He was giving us armor. He was saying that suffering is part of life. Struggle is guaranteed, but strength is optional. And that strength comes from knowing why you're in the fight. This quote isn't just about enduring suffering. It's about transforming it. And the transformation begins when you decide your life isn't just happening to you. It's happening for you, for the purpose you choose, the mission you claim, the values you live for. Now, you might be thinking, what if I don't know my why? That's okay. You're not alone. Most people never even stop to ask. But now that you've heard this message, you can't unhear it. The question is in you now. And that question, if you're willing to answer it, will become your compass. Because when you find your why, you don't just survive life. You rise through it. Stay with me. In the next section, we'll explore how Viktor Frankl used this idea to survive the worst horrors imaginable, and how you can use the same principle to survive anything you're facing. Let's now look at someone who didn't just quote this idea. He lived it, breathed it, and built an entire philosophy around it. Viktor Frankl, an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist, survived the Nazi concentration camps. He watched friends, family, and strangers suffer and die. And yet, through that unimaginable pain, he discovered something that would later save countless lives. That something was meaning. Frankl took Nietzsche's idea that purpose can sustain us through suffering and proved it on the harshest stage imaginable. He documented what he saw in one of the most influential books of the 20th century, Man's Search for Meaning. This book isn't a feel-good memoir. It's a powerful philosophical statement wrapped in human suffering and spiritual survival. Frankl noticed something deeply important. The people who had something to live for, something beyond themselves, were more likely to survive, even if they were starving, even if they were sick, even if they had been broken emotionally and physically. If they had a reason, a why, they would hold on. That reason could be anything. Hope of seeing a loved one again, finishing a manuscript, keeping a promise, helping others survive. But once that why was lost, the person often gave up. And when the will died, the body followed. Let me read you one of Frankl's most important thoughts. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. This isn't just a quote, it's a knife through the illusion we often carry. The illusion that life must be comfortable to be good or easy to be worth living. Frankl flipped that entirely. He showed that even the most horrific conditions can become bearable when infused with purpose. Now here's where it gets practical for you. Logotherapy, Frankl's school of thought, is based on the idea that the primary motivation of humans is the search for meaning. Not pleasure, not power, but purpose. This is different from what Freud or Adler said. Freud believed we are motivated by pleasure. Adler said we are motivated by power. But Frankl believed that the deepest part of us isn't looking for comfort or control. It's looking for a reason. In logotherapy, Frankl said there are 3 ways to discover meaning. First, by creating a work or doing a deed, contributing something to the world. Second, by experiencing something or encountering someone, like love, beauty, or connection. And third, by the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering, choosing dignity and growth, even in pain. That third one is the most powerful and the rarest. It means you can find meaning even when your life feels like it's falling apart. You can say, I choose to rise through this. I choose to let this shape me, not break me. Frankl saw patients who were suicidal, people who had lost everything, and helped them shift their mindset by helping them reconnect to their why. One patient, devastated by the death of his wife, found peace when he realized his suffering spared her the pain of losing him. That single shift gave his pain meaning, and in that meaning, he found the strength to go on. Let me ask you this. Have you ever reframed your suffering as something sacred, as a calling, not a curse? Most people never even try, but Frankl showed us it's possible. He showed us that we are not prisoners of our pain, we are authors of its meaning. There's one more thing Frankl said that deserves to be tattooed on your mind. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That space, that is where your why lives. That is where your power lives. That is where you stop reacting and start deciding who you want to become. Frankl didn't preach his philosophy. He lived it. And because he lived it, we now have a guide to walk through our own darkness. He proved that Nietzsche's quote isn't just poetic. It's real. It's life-saving. So the next time you face something that feels too big, too painful, too heavy, remember Viktor Frankl. Remember the men and women who clung to a sliver of purpose and found a way through. You have that same potential. You don't need to escape the pain. You need to transform it. You don't need to avoid the storm. You need to anchor your soul. Because when your why is clear, your how becomes possible. Let's take what we learned so far and make it even more personal. If you've been listening closely, you're probably wondering, what kind of why am I supposed to find? That's a great question, and one that philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual teachers have been exploring for thousands of years. Here's the truth. Your why can take different forms, but they all lead to the same place, meaning. And meaning gives you power. Let's explore 3 powerful types of why that people throughout history have used to give their lives direction and strength: personal, relational, and spiritual. Let's start with the personal why. This is the kind of purpose that lives inside your dreams, your ambitions, your hunger to grow. It's the vision that wakes you up in the morning and keeps you moving when things get tough. A personal why might be your desire to become a writer, a business owner, a healer, an athlete, a creator. It's that quiet fire that says, I was made for more. Think of someone like Helen Keller. She lost her sight and hearing as a child, but through intense struggle and perseverance, she became an author, speaker, and advocate. Her personal why was to break through isolation and prove that limitations do not define worth. She said, life is either a daring adventure or nothing at all. Now consider the relational why. This one is rooted in love. It's about the people who matter most to you. Parents often find this why in their children. Spouses find it in each other. Friends find it in loyalty. A soldier in battle doesn't always fight for an idea, and sometimes they fight for the person beside them. A relational why is powerful because it gets you out of your head. It reminds you that your life is connected to others, that your choices ripple, that someone is depending on your strength. Think of Malala Yousafzai, who survived a violent attack and went on to fight for girls' education. Her why wasn't just personal, it was relational. She wanted her sisters, her friends, her people to have the freedom to learn. She said, one child, one teacher, one book, one pen can change the world. That's the power of love turned into action. And then there's the spiritual why. This is the most transcendent form of purpose. It's the belief that your life fits into something bigger, something eternal, divine, or deeply meaningful beyond what we can fully see. You don't have to be religious to have a spiritual why. You just have to believe that your existence is part of a larger story, that your pain can serve a higher purpose, that your efforts are seen even when they aren't applauded. This type of why has carried saints, sages, and revolutionaries through brutal seasons. Think of Gandhi. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. Think of the Dalai Lama. Their why was bigger than themselves. That's what gave them endurance in the face of violence, imprisonment, exile. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "If a man hasn't discovered something that he will die for, he isn't fit to live." Harsh? Maybe. But behind it is a profound truth. When you discover a why that's worth your whole life, it brings your whole life into focus. Now here's something important to remember. These 3 types of why, personal, relational, spiritual, are not in competition. They often overlap. The most powerful whys usually touch all 3. For example, your dream of becoming a doctor, personal. may be inspired by a desire to help your community, relational, and a belief that healing is sacred work, spiritual. When all three align, something incredible happens. Your actions feel more grounded. Your pain feels more bearable. Your life feels more alive. But even if you only connect with one, that's enough. If your why is to raise a child with love, that's enough. If your why is to write a book that helps just one person feel less alone, that's enough. If your why is simply to honor the life you've been given, that's enough. You don't need 1,000,000 followers. You don't need the perfect job. You just need a reason to keep going, a reason that lights a spark when everything feels dark. So ask yourself again, what's your why? Is it buried beneath disappointment? Is it hidden under fear? Is it waiting for you to stop running and start listening? Wherever it is, your job is not to invent it. Your job is to uncover it, to live in a way that points toward it. Because once you know your why, really know it, you don't have to force motivation anymore. You don't have to fake courage. You don't have to pretend. Your why becomes your fuel, your compass, your shield. And when the how gets hard, and it always does, you won't break. You'll bend, you'll adjust, you'll rise, because your life is no longer driven by comfort or fear. It's driven by purpose, and purpose changes everything. We've talked about the philosophical weight of having a why. Now, let's look at what modern science and psychology tell us. Because purpose isn't just inspiring, it's measurable. It changes the chemistry of your brain. It rewires your habits. It even strengthens your immune system. This isn't theory. It's tested. It's proven. It's real. Let's start with the study from the University of Michigan. Researchers followed older adults and discovered that those who reported having a strong sense of purpose were far less likely to die prematurely than those who didn't. Their conclusion? Purpose improves longevity, not slightly, significantly. Why? Because purpose is connected to everything: motivation, mental health, stress resilience, even heart health. When you wake up with a reason, no matter how small, your brain triggers neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. These aren't just happy chemicals. They regulate mood, energy, and drive. They're the fuel of action. Let me break it down simply. When your brain believes your life matters, your body fights to protect it. Another study from Harvard found that people with a sense of meaning were more likely to recover faster from surgery, less likely to experience cognitive decline, and more resilient under pressure. This isn't about thinking positive. It's about thinking purposeful. Dr. Martin Seligman, one of the fathers of positive psychology, identified meaning as one of the 5 essential pillars of well-being, alongside engagement, relationships, accomplishment, and positive emotion. Without meaning, even pleasure fades. Even success feels hollow. Have you ever reached a goal you thought would change everything, only to feel empty afterward? That's because goals are not enough. You need a deeper reason behind them. You need your why. Purpose is what keeps you going when motivation disappears. It's what helps you move forward even when you're tired, discouraged, or uncertain. It gives you psychological resilience, the ability to bounce back instead of break down. Let's look at how this works in real life. Imagine 2 students studying for the same exam. One wants a good grade to avoid getting yelled at. The other wants to master the subject because it's the foundation of the career they dream about. Same task, very different experience. The one with purpose pushes through late nights, distractions, setbacks, because they're connected to a bigger outcome. Now, scale that to your life. If your only motivation is to get by, you'll always be tired. But if you're anchored in a purpose that means something to you, even the hardest days have meaning. Another fascinating study from Yale found that hospital janitors who believed their job helped patients heal were happier, more engaged, and even more productive than those who saw their work as just cleaning. Same job, different why. That's the secret. The what matters less than the why behind it. And here's another truth. Purpose protects you from burnout. A report in the Journal of Occupational Health Psychology showed that employees who felt their work was meaningful were more energized and less emotionally exhausted, even in high-stress jobs. So if you're feeling burnt out, overwhelmed, or disconnected, ask yourself, am I connected to my purpose? Am I remembering why I started? Because when you lose your why, the how becomes unbearable. But when you rediscover it, everything shifts. You stop counting the hours. You stop chasing quick wins. You start living intentionally. Here's the beautiful part. Your brain wants purpose. It craves it. Studies using brain scans show that when people talk about their life's purpose, their brain's reward centers light up the same way they would during experiences of joy and accomplishment. That means purpose isn't just some external concept. It's hardwired into you. It's a biological need. Even your immune system responds. Researchers at UCLA found that people with a deep sense of purpose had lower levels of inflammatory gene expression, meaning their bodies were literally less prone to disease. That's how powerful meaning is. This doesn't mean every day will be easy, but it means every day can be worthwhile. When you're anchored in purpose, you don't run from hard things, you move through them. Not because it's fun, because it's worth it. Science and psychology agree with Nietzsche, with Frankl, and with the Stoics. Your why isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's as important to your health as sleep, food, and exercise. So if you've been feeling lost, numb, or disconnected, it's not a personal failure. It might just mean you've lost touch with your deeper why. And the good news is, you can find it again. You can build it again. You can choose it again. In the next section, we'll look at what happens when we live without purpose and why so many people today are silently suffering because they've forgotten how to connect to something greater. Stay with me. Your why is more powerful than you think. Now that you've seen how powerful purpose can be, scientifically, psychologically, spiritually, let's take a hard look at the other side. What happens when people lose their why or never find one to begin with? Because not everyone lives with purpose. In fact, many people walk through life completely disconnected from anything deeper than survival or distraction. And that disconnection comes at a heavy cost. When someone lives without a sense of meaning, they don't just feel bored. They often feel empty, lost. Number. They may seem fine on the outside, but inside they carry a silent ache. Days blur together. Goals feel meaningless. Achievements feel hollow. You can see it in the rise of anxiety, depression, burnout, addiction, and even suicide, especially in high-functioning, outwardly successful people. Why? Because even comfort, even money, even approval can't satisfy a soul starving for purpose. Albert Camus once wrote, "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." That's a heavy statement, But he wasn't glorifying despair. He was acknowledging that without meaning, life itself feels unbearable. Without a why, even the smallest difficulty feels impossible to carry. You might know someone like this. Maybe you've been there yourself, waking up, going through the motions, wondering what the point is. Not because you're weak, but because you're not connected to something greater than your current situation. You're alive, but not truly living. And here's what's most dangerous. The more we ignore that inner void, the more we try to fill it with things that don't satisfy. Scrolling, spending, substance, comparison. But those are temporary highs. They distract us from the pain, but they don't heal it. They don't anchor us. They only deepen the disconnection. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard described this as the sickness unto death, a spiritual disease where a person loses the sense of who they are and why they're here. It's not a physical death, but an emotional one, a loss of meaning that makes life feel like a shadow instead of a flame. And yet, there is hope, because just as losing purpose leads to decay, finding it brings renewal. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. You simply need to start asking honest questions. What do I care about? What am I avoiding? What am I meant to contribute? Even the act of asking begins the healing, because when you question your existence with sincerity, the answers begin to surface. Slowly, quietly, but powerfully. Remember, no one can hand you your purpose. It's something you must discover for yourself. But that discovery, that inner awakening, can revive a tired heart, ignite a stagnant soul, and bring color back into the gray areas of life. In the next section, we'll explore why the very act of searching for meaning, even before you find it, is one of the most life-affirming things you can do. Because you were never meant to drift. You were made to live on purpose. Let's get something straight. The search for meaning is not a distraction from life. It is life. You might think that you need to have your purpose figured out right now. That unless you have one crystal clear mission or one blazing passion, you're falling behind. But that's a myth. Meaning isn't a finish line, it's a journey. And that journey in itself is sacred. Philosopher Joseph Campbell once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." But how do you become who you are? By exploring, by failing, by rising again, by daring to ask the deeper questions even when the answers take time to reveal themselves. Carl Jung believed that the human experience is a process of individuation, becoming more and more the person you were meant to be. That's not instant. That's not easy. It's a process of discovery, of shedding false layers, of coming back to your essence. You don't have to be perfect to pursue meaning. In fact, it's often the broken places that lead us to our truest paths. Some people find meaning in the aftermath of heartbreak. Others find it after losing everything. The key is to stay curious, to believe there's something worth uncovering. The search itself is transformative. When you ask, "Why am I here?" you wake up parts of your soul that have been asleep. When you ask, "What am I meant to give?" you stop seeing yourself as a victim of life and start becoming a co-creator. Even if you don't have all the answers yet, even if you're still confused, still searching, that search is a sign that you're alive in the deepest sense. Because apathy doesn't ask questions. Numbness doesn't seek truth. But you are seeking, and that makes all the difference. The journey toward purpose doesn't begin when everything is clear. It begins when you decide to keep walking, even when the path is foggy. So if you've ever felt like you're behind, like everyone else has it figured out except you, breathe. You're not behind. You're on the path. Your questions matter. Your curiosity matters. And as long as you keep moving forward with an open heart, the meaning will find you, sometimes in ways you never expected. In the next section, we'll explore how ancient wisdom across cultures approached this search, and how understanding their perspectives can help guide your own. Because your path doesn't have to look like anyone else's, it just has to be true to you. Across the globe and through centuries, great thinkers have wrestled with one common question: why are we here? And while their answers may differ in form, they all lead to one fundamental truth: that the Stoics, born in ancient Greece and later embraced by Rome, believed that purpose was found in living according to nature, in harmony with reason, virtue, and self-control. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous Stoic philosophers, wrote in his journal, Meditations, "Everything, a horse, a vine, is created for a purpose. What then were you created for?" To the Stoics, meaning came not from external success, but from living with inner alignment. Epictetus taught that we cannot control what happens, but we can always control how we respond. And that response, if rooted in wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, was a life well lived. They didn't see suffering as something to avoid. They saw it as a test of your purpose, a chance to practice virtue. Now, shift your lens to the East, to traditions like Taoism and Buddhism, which take a different but equally powerful approach. In Taoism, purpose is not something you force or define with rigid logic. It's something you flow with. Lao Tzu, the author of the Tao Te Ching, wrote, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." The Tao, or the Way, teaches us that meaning often comes through surrender, not control. When you stop chasing status, perfection, or comparison, you align with a deeper, more natural rhythm of life. Purpose emerges when you stop grasping and start listening. Buddhism, too, sees suffering as central to life. But instead of fighting suffering, it teaches us to understand it, and through that understanding, to find peace. The Four Noble Truths begin with this honest declaration: life involves suffering. But through mindfulness, compassion, and the Eightfold Path, one can transcend suffering by letting go of attachment and ego. In both Taoism and Buddhism, the focus is less on chasing your purpose and more on realizing it by living in the present, by being aware, and by acting with kindness. Now let's bring in the existentialists, modern philosophers like Søren Kierkegaard, Jean-Paul Sartre, and Albert Camus, who emerged in response to a world increasingly skeptical of religious or cosmic meaning. They asked, what if there is no grand design? Can life still have purpose? Their answer, absolutely, but it's up to you to create it. Existentialism says that meaning is not given, it is made, that freedom is your burden and your gift. Kierkegaard called this the leap of faith, the courage to believe your life matters even when it's no proof. Sartre said, existence precedes essence, meaning you are not born with a fixed identity. You shape who you are through your choices. Camus pushed this even further. In the myth of Sisyphus, he compares life to a man endlessly rolling a boulder uphill. But instead of despairing, Camus suggests we imagine Sisyphus happy because he has accepted the absurd and chosen to continue anyway. That, to Camus, is the ultimate act of meaning-making, to rebel against despair by choosing to live with intention. Each of these traditions, Stoic, Eastern, Existentialist, offers a different doorway to purpose. One says, live with virtue. Another says, flow with life. Another says, create your own meaning. And none of them require perfection, only presence, only honesty, only courage. So which lens speaks to you? Maybe it's the calm acceptance of the Tao. Maybe it's the inner strength of the Stoics. Maybe it's the defiant creativity of the existentialists. There is no right answer, only the one that helps you walk forward with more clarity.